Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kevin. Like you said, my name's Jonathan or John, I go by. And actually, I'm going to mostly be tag teaming this presentation with Kyle today, so he'll be jumping in pretty frequently as well. So we work for OST. We're an implementation partner of Configura, which means we build extensions for their clients in the CET world. So OST has a lot of different practices, including our very own configuration services, which helps meet you where you're at and develop your extension for you in CET. The other practices include design, application development, and a lot of other ways of helping you with your software solutions. And we are a cross-functional company that utilizes all of those in our extension development as well. So today, Kyle and I are going to be talking to you about what you can get out of a catalog extension. And a lot of people don't really believe that a catalog extension is a good extension because PGC is what everybody wants. But we're here to tell you why we at OST will always strongly encourage you to start with a catalog extension before you move into a PGC extension in 100% of the situations.
So one of the big bold claims that I guess you're like, whoa, why catalog extensions? And we truly believe that with all extensions, manufacturer's data is the most important part to any extension. You can have a fantastic development team, a fantastic business team, but if the data is really, really bad, you're not going to be able to program around that. Or if you can somehow get there, it's going to be very, very expensive and take a lot of time. So what a catalog extension does is allows the manufacturer to really take an in-depth look at their data. And how do we, not only is the data of good quality, but how do we leverage what's already there? If you're a manufacturer that is getting into the space, or if you've already gotten into the CET space, I'd bet that your extension does, or your data does exist somewhere in your ERP system, or you currently export your data to another spec tool that specifies your product. And we need to take a really good look at how we can leverage that, because your CET extension is ultimately a journey, in that this isn't just a one-time catalog upload into CET. Your product's going to change monthly. You're going to want to make corrections. Your prices are going to change. Your materials are going to change. Your options are probably going to change. So, it's really, how do we identify the best way to get your data not just once, but every time.
So before we really dive into it, I want to jump a little bit on what Kevin mentioned earlier. If you have questions, feel free to step up because this is a conversation that could be different for every client and everybody that's working with a CET extension. Because like Kyle just mentioned, it's a journey and it's going to be different for everybody. And everybody's at a different stage in that journey, whether you're just getting ready to jump into CET or maybe you already have an extension that has mostly PGC but doesn't have a catalog backend. This can be applicable to you as well. So jump in with questions anytime you have them. Even specific situations can help not only you, but everyone else here too. So before we really dive into it, we're going to make sure that everybody has the background that's necessary. So I'm going to talk briefly about what a catalog extension is versus a PGC extension. Everybody kind of knows PGC, or parametric graphical configuration, as the smart extension, while as a catalog extension, on the contrary, would be the basic extension. Basically, a catalog extension just lets you bring in all of your product from a catalog that was created using the database on Configura's CET platform. So it has all of your products in it, and it just lets them bring them in their basic format. It uses your ERP data on the back end, just like the PGC extension does, so you can see how one can transition into the other well. A catalog extension is often very quick to create, so you can usually get an entire catalog extension with your whole portfolio of products in the time it might take you to do one or two product lines in PGC. And catalog extensions are very good for simple products, something that doesn't have a lot of rules, or a lot of configuration to it. You just bring it in and there it is, it's in the scene. And now you can sell that product. And catalog extensions are great for that, and often the PGC overlay on that isn't necessary. So on the other hand, the PGC extension, the smart extension, the extension everybody wants, the flashy extension, it often requires a lot more time to develop and is really good for complex rules that can all be done on the back end. While as because of that, it's going to require a full development team and a long-term effort to sustain and to make user-friendly.
I had some feedback that my mic's a little bit awkward. Is this better?
Yes, that is
Yes.
better.
Okay, good. On team no mic. Okay. Um, so, what is, John reviewed what a catalog provides and what the user experience of a catalog extension and PGC extension will look like. But if we want to take like just a brief technical overview of what lives inside a catalog, it really holds your part numbers, materials, options, and models. So if you're used to like other spec tools, you bring something into the scene. It's got a few features and options that can change. Maybe the let or the leg type of a table, or the rim material or the rim type of your work surface. It can change maybe if the work surface is a cross grain or not. Potentially that could be a different part number, but each manufacturer's data is a little bit different. And that catalog data can be loaded from your SIF data. If that is, if your company uses the .SIF data, we can use that to create your data. And ultimately, the catalog is used to help create the SKUs that can be ordered. So those features and options, once it gets brought into CET, helps create that SKU that ultimately gets ordered.
So that was a great overview quickly of what a catalog is, but what's a catalog extension as opposed to a catalog? So you have your catalog first from the database and it has everything Kyle just went into. You can use that in CET. You can open it up in the catalog browser and bring things in, but the catalog browser can be a bit of a painful experience to actually develop an entire space with. And so a catalog extension is a more user-friendly overlay for you to use the data in your catalog. So it allows you to search for different products from your client. It allows you to filter out different types. And it adds an extension on Configura's CET marketplace, which means you can check the big box that says we have a CET extension. You have a catalog extension, you can dive in, and everything that your product has can be specified in CET.
And we're not here to tell you that a catalog extension is the end all be all, or it's the greatest user experience on the face of the planet, and you're going to rule the world with your catalog extension. But there really are some downsides to the catalog extension. There are changes. I guess one of the plus sides with catalog extension is that Configura's internal R&D team is making changes to it every release, and you're going to see continuous improvements, and we have seen continuous improvements over the past couple of years. But with your catalog extension, you're going to see it difficult to navigate your library in CET. You really don't have much of a choice on your library format. It's kind of correlated to how your data is structured. So if you have, for example, if you have two product lines that are kind of used interchangeably, but they're in different catalogs, they're going to probably have to be in different libraries without a lot of work. And then once you start getting into that lot of work situation, you start asking, well, why don't we just make this PGC? So you're kind of stuck with the out of the box method. With a catalog extension, you also have to, it's going to be hard to make changes to your drawing. So if you have a table that comes in and it's 18 by 36, and maybe in a revision process they want it to be a little cheaper, so you're going to shrink it down to maybe you're going to shrink that table down to 32, right? That's going to have to go through. You're going to either have to do like a mass replace. You're going to have to go through. You're going to have to delete every one of those works, or all each one of those tables. You're going to have to bring in the smaller version. So versus with a PGC, you'd be able to stretch that to a smaller width. And then the really big thing is manually having to add every part. A lot of designers, specifically if you're an external, if your user team is external, they can be it's not expected of them to have to know every single specification rule when you start getting into complicated things like case goods and panels, and making sure that the bracket count's correct and that the work surface will stand up and that it meets all the specification rules.
there are things that can be set up on the back end with PGC that automatically adds every part. With a catalog extension, you're going to have to make sure that the user is going through and adding every single part into the space. And so it's going to kind of be prone to mistakes and going to require a little bit extra time for audit. So I guess those are the downsides, but we still really do believe that it's the right step.
Yeah, like Kyle just mentioned, with all these downsides we're bringing up, we're probably losing some of you who are here to see what's so great about a catalog extension, right? But bear with us because we're getting there. We just want to level with everybody that a catalog extension isn't the end all be all. It's not where you want to end up, but it's absolutely where you want to start. But companies will often hear the feedback from their users. We want PGC. We want this cool functionality. We want everything to be able to stretch and everything to be super fast and do all the rules for us. And so companies want to skip a catalog extension and move right into going straight PGC right out the gate. And we've seen a lot of companies do that in our implementation partner history at OST. But we're here to tell you that that's dangerous, and your long-lasting user experience is not going to be as good as if you set up a catalog basis first. So we want you to start with a catalog extension and then move into PGC extensions. And now we're going to start to transition to tell you why.
One of the big things about yours, or one of the big misconceptions people get is they're getting into their CET. They want to get their CET extension in the marketplace. Is that your CET extension is ultimately a journey. You're going to start at point A, and there is no finish line per se. There's just existing in the space. It kind of references. I think about it when if you're into this, like Simon Sinek, he talks about the infinite game, and your CET extension is ultimately an infinite game, and that you're just kind of, your goal is to exist out in the space and continuously have users specify your product. But there is no like, my CET extension is done, I don't have to put any more money into it. It's just going to sit there. It's going to be like an investment in like a stock per se. That's not the case. So people who have that kind of mindset, they want that PGC extension right now. They want it yesterday. They're told by their executive team that they want it yesterday, and that the users say they want PGC. But we believe here at OSC, and we've kind of experienced it, is that starting small is really important. And starting small with a human-centered design is probably the best way to get to that finish line effectively, quickly, and for less time and money. So, you create that catalog extension, you get into the marketplace, and let's see how we can get an ROI, return on investment in the long term.
So these are the main points that we're going to be bringing up, coming up in these next few slides here about the benefits of a catalog first approach and why we believe you should start with a catalog. If at the end of this presentation we've got you convinced, let's say you're just a designer and you're like, wow, why don't we have a catalog extension? Or you're getting ready to start and you're like, all right, let's start with a catalog. This is the way we want to go with this. But you got to convince someone else. You got to bring it to someone higher up or show them your reasoning for this. This slide right here, if you don't want to just show them the entire presentation, this slide right here is the bulleted list of why you should start with a catalog first. So the first thing is that it's going to give you a quality long-term user experience. While users want PGC in the long run, they're going to be able to guide your extension development by working on your catalog extension. You're going to see what they're using, where their pain points are, where your complex product rules that can increase with a PGC extension are, and you can guide your PGC development with that. The second thing is going to be a quicker return on investment. I mentioned earlier, sometimes like one or two of your product lines can take as long to get into PGC as your entire portfolio in a catalog extension. So by starting with a catalog extension, not only throughout your entire PGC development, but the entirety of your time on the marketplace, all of your product is available to be specified and sold in CET. You're going to build a solid revenue stream. So you'll start with a catalog and you'll slowly increase that revenue stream as you develop into your PGC extension. And lastly, and probably more importantly, as Kyle mentioned earlier, your data is going to be solid. Catalog extension is mostly data. And by starting with a catalog extension, you're going to be forced to address that early so that your PGC extension is better later.
So when you start with a catalog extension, we think you're setting the building blocks for a long-term quality user experience. And when you do create a catalog extension, the first and foremost thing is you're going to have your entire company's portfolio on initial release. And that's pretty important because if you're a manufacturer and you think about your product is usually intertwined with other products. So you start getting in this like spider web. Well, then everything has to be PGC. I can't just make this case goods line without catalog. I can just create the case goods line. It's like, well, then I need my accessories. Well, I should probably have my chairs then too because they're setting work surfaces. They probably want chairs. And, I can't just create a conference table line without my chairs. Can't create my conference table line without my electrical accessories. So it kind of becomes that spider web versus when you do a catalog extension, you get your entire company's portfolio right away. As you're going through that user experience, you do start to get user feedback, which is really important. And as if you have a chance to watch Derek's presentation earlier, it's focused on human-centered design. And one of the biggest insights in that is that as a manufacturer, you're not the user. So we've seen a lot with manufacturers is in this graphic here, the manufacturer in pink and the technology team, which is a mix of the IT team at the manufacturer and would be people like John and I, we get together and we're like, we're going to create a super cool CET extension. And we end up in that like top left where it's a quality app, but no one uses it. And it's because we don't bring in the users, the people who are ultimately going to use it. We end up with this, well, just make it like competitor X. And they have different brands with different ideals and different market groups per se even. So you really need to make sure that you're collecting that user feedback and that you're building the extension from day one around the users. And with that user feedback, you can guide future extension development. Sales data does go a long way, but as you go through that CT journey, you start to see, maybe larger offices are specified in CET, but those one-offs maybe might use a different online configurator. So how do we make sure that we're getting the maximum return on investment from that? And, that involves deciding what extension should be PGC first right away. If you just get together and the technology team and the business team says we're going to make this product line PGC, no one really knows if the users are actually want that. So getting in the catalog, try to start collecting user data. It is a journey at the end of the day. So ultimately, you do want to be in that red in the middle where you're kind of getting all the part of the business, user, and technology together to really create a good extension. And because usually what ends up happening in my experience is the users complain to the business that they're not in CET, and the business reaches out to the technology that they need to be in CET, and there's not this like continuous, there's very little, between the technology and the users, and they're not all brought to the table at the same time, which is really important in creating a great CET extension.
Whoops. So the next thing we're going to jump into is the quicker return on investment. I've mentioned it a few times, but it's just very important to keep reiterating is how quickly you can get a catalog extension on the marketplace compared to a PGC extension. So I love this graphic that one of our designers at OST, Maria, gave to us because if you think about a race and you got catalog and PGC next to each other, imagine your catalog extension gets a 30-second head start. And the entire time that catalog is ahead of PGC or that PGC is ahead of catalog, you're making money. So there's the return on investment you're going to be getting by because catalog gets that full 30-second head start. If you go straight into PGC, you start them running at the same time, and that catalog never makes you any money because it's always going to be behind PGC. And not to mention, most of the time, you're going to want your PGC extension to have a catalog on the back anyways. Having a data-driven extension with catalog extensions on the back end is a quality user experience and can allow you as the owner of your extension to maintain your data on the back end in the catalog. So by starting with the catalog, you already have that step knocked out of the way, and you don't have to develop them hand in hand on the side. And then, as Kyle mentioned earlier, your entire portfolio is in CET. Anytime you have anything that you want to bring cross extension into the scene, case good lines with chairs, you want overheads, you want lower storage. Even if you just develop the case goods line in PGC after your catalog is in, they can then populate in those chairs. They can populate in those accessories. They may not be as smart, they may not be as intuitive because they're in PGC, but you have them. A designer may come in who isn't a designer for your specific extension, an external designer, and they decide they want to use your case good lines because they like it. If that's all they have access to, they're then going to move to another extension and they're going to buy chairs, they're going to buy accessories, they're going to buy overheads from that other extension. While as if you have it in a catalog, they can spec the entire scene in just your product, and that's a lot more money made for you and a quicker return on your investment just for making a catalog extension.
And one of the, I think the big things with the ROI as well as John alluded to, is that, you know, if you are ultimately looking at a PGC extension, is that, you know, the catalog's going to probably have to be there on the back end anyways. And the quickest way to get a PGC extension is to have utilize your data. So the catalog is going to have to be there anyway. So let's take that intermediate step and create a catalog extension. And what that does is that builds a revenue stream. So, you know, you kind of have heard from your users that you want to be in CET, in this hypothetical world where your manufacturer hasn't been in CET, who isn't in CET yet. And you're kind of getting your feet wet. You don't really know what this whole CET thing is about. But someone has told you from your executive team that you need to be in CET and you need to be in CET as of yesterday. But what does that really mean for you as a company? You know, you sell furniture, you sell material handling, or it really doesn't, I would say, like, it's not going to directly bring you, you know, revenue. So let's start small. Let's start building that revenue stream. Let's see how much CET actually brings you. So we can get you on the marketplace. You know, designers can download it and use it, and they can start providing, you know, a good or increase. They can provide feedback for increased future value. So as we get into the extension, you know, they can start molding. You can start collecting that data. Like, how much do we really sell of this product line in CET? You know, is that worth it to make it PGC? Will we get more? Will we get, you know, are people not using it? Is it fantastic as a catalog? Like, if, you know, for example, if you're really just selling task chairs in CET, then we don't need to make it PGC. Task chairs are very simple to specify. They don't need to be incredibly smart and do all that fancy stuff that maybe, you know, something like a panel system will need.
So the last and maybe the most important thing is that the first thing we said, the catalog extension is going to force you to look at your data. The data is the king of your extensions, whether it be a catalog extension or a PGC extension. And by starting with a catalog extension, which is just 99% data with a 1% wrapper over top of it for bringing things in, it's going to force you to look at that right away. You're going to find out if your models are good. You're going to find out if your models are layered properly, if your materials look good in CET. You're going to find out if your part numbers are intuitive and if it makes sense. You're going to find out if how your ordering process goes through works well. All of that is going to be involved in the data that you put in your catalog. You know, when I'm not presenting at CET Experience, and Kyle too, we're both consultants at OST and we do a lot of PGC development. So when we get into an extension that doesn't have good data, there's not a lot we can do about it. It's very hard to work around an extension with bad data. It takes a lot more time and effort on our end, which is then money for you, in order to work around that bad data. And then let's say down the line, you want to integrate your catalog with a different system at your company, like an ERP system. Then you go through, you have to fix up your data for this new system. And then all the work we did to work around your bad data in the PGC extension is ruined. Your origins on your work surfaces or your storage could all be out of place. Everything could be graphically offset differently. And now all of your users' old drawings as well as your products don't make sense anymore. The PGC rules we put in won't work. And that's all from a point of view of a developer who's seen this before. If you start with a catalog extension, you're going to look at your data first and you're going to make sure everything is intuitive and it makes sense from the back end. And then when you go to get into PGC, it's nice and easy. It's very maintainable, and it's easy to move into a PGC extension from that.
So, I guess, to wrap things up, if you're a new extension owner in the marketplace, we really challenge you to do your homework and consider looking at a catalog extension for your PGC extension. And as we go through all the downsides, it isn't a whole lot about the end product that you're going to look at, but really at your data. And this isn't just from a developer's point of view; it's from a business point of view as well, and that you're going to get a better return on your investment if you can really take a step back, look at your models, or look at your models and layering. Make sure those are nice and clean, that they make sense, that your product data comes from a single source of truth. A good example we have is we had a customer come to us and say, we really want a catalog extension and we really need to be in it really quickly. So we took an export of their data and created a catalog extension, but really didn't, the data wasn't great, and there was a ton of roadblocks, working with their internal team and how to create a tool that, can take from their product data and create a good CET catalog. So we ended up just massaging the data manually and then submitting a CET extension or creating a catalog extension for them. Well, it's really, really hard for that customer now to maintain that data. And, I look at it as, learning experience from my point of view is I probably should have pushed harder to say that we should really look at make sure that we pull from your single source of truth, that it doesn't require, a person every month to take a couple of days and manually put in all the changes to their data catalogs in CET. That's a big waste of money, a waste of time, and it's very prone to mistakes. And if you forget one feature, that could mess up someone's order. You could miss one price list, and all of a sudden now you might have to call a customer and tell them that they're using incorrect pricing. And that's always a fun nightmare to have. And looking at your data integrity is really big too. I think a lot of manufacturers have this false sense of hope that their data is really, really strong, when in theory there are a lot of things that might not have models yet, might not have the most materials, or might not have all the materials defined in their ERP system. They've kind of been using workarounds for years, and it's really a good time when you're creating a catalog extension to identify those workarounds that have just kind of become habit and really try to make them right. So that's really where we're at. That's it.
So yeah, we at OST, we're implementation partners that can help you meet your extension at whatever part of the journey it's at. And so this will be often an early step where you're deciding, do I want a catalog extension or do I want a PGC extension? And it even could be a little bit into your journey where you decided earlier to go straight for PGC and maybe you're regretting it a little bit. And now you can still go back and get that back end catalog extension for the rest of your extensions in your product lines, because we here will believe that you always should start with a catalog extension. And this may not have been applicable to everybody at every step of their journey, but we will be back for the next breakout session discussing a little bit about getting some return on your investments at other steps in your journey. And so if you want to tune in for that as well. And this will also be recorded if you ever need to go back and try to convince someone else that you need your extension to be a catalog extension, or you need a catalog backend for your extension. So I know it's a little bit shorter of a presentation than some of the other breakouts that are going to be out, but we have plenty of time for questions and answers, and you can always reach out to Kyle or I at any point as well. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to bring them up. We have the time.
Jonathan and Kyle, thank you guys so much. Absolutely, to ask those questions. Like we said, we have a couple different ways that we can do that. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute your mic so you can go ahead and ask. You can also type those into the chat or the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen here. I'll jump in with a question. So you had mentioned, starting out with the catalog-driven extension really forces manufacturers to look at their data and really focus on that on the front end. What are some of those things that you've seen partners have to clean up or really invest in from a data perspective to be able to get their catalog extension where they need to be kind of kicking things off?
Yeah, I can jump on that one, Kyle. I gave a brief story about it, but I can dive a little more into it. Let's say you just kind of throw all of your models and your layers and into a catalog for your first PGC extension. Let's say you're working on like a case goods line, for example, and you just kind of throw all of that in there and then develop the PGC wrapper right on top of it once you have the models and everything in. If you then come back later for something like an ERP system where you actually have to look at your data again, you're going to end up going in and changing, like, for example, where your origin point is on this work surface, where the graphics are offset, maybe how clean the models look, which you might have already fixed up on the back end for PGC, or maybe different things have changed about your models or that you're not looking at. I just saw that question. But so when it comes back to looking at and cleaning up your data, is when you end up running into issues with the fact that you overlooked it the first time. And it can affect not only your old drawings, because you have to go back into your PGC development and fix it up for what the data looks like now, which is what it should have looked like in the first place.
Gotcha. Thank
Did
you.
that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it absolutely did. We did have a question in the Q&A box, more of a statement. Did you know that OST is cheese in Swedish? So this is a good blending of our presenters and our Swedish heritage as an organization. So thanks to Anonymous for submitting that.
I did not know that, but I love that.
That's pretty fantastic. Carl mentioned in the chat box here, organizing the library was a challenge for our seating cat extension, many icons. Anything to speak into to that experience?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I think that it's been like, I think a lot of people have a big problem with that. The problem with the catalog extension library and is that it uses your data structure as your UX. And I think that sentence, like as a developer, kind of scares me because data structure and UX should not be used in the same sentence. In that, your user experience, is definitely more human centered, and your data structure is like, how can we effectively access and reuse this data and align this in the correct table structure? So that's kind of the issue with your catalog extension is you end up with this massive library that the users are kind of like, why do I have to scroll this far? Or why is this split up where on the data backend it makes complete sense, but on the front end it doesn't. So that's, I guess, one of the big downsides to a catalog extension is the library structure.
In that, though, we have in our experience, we've kind of seen pseudo catalog extensions, I'll say, where we've been able to kind of just jump in and look at the UX instead. You're still pulling from the catalog extension itself, but you can kind of adjust, like add your own custom, I guess, PGC filters in, so that your library is a little more clean looking, even though it's still bringing in just straight catalog symbols. You don't have to fully convert your extension, for example, your seating extension to PGC to clean up your library a little bit. And that's definitely a big pain point that I'm sure a lot of clients have with their extensions. And it can, again, circle back to our other panelist here who's hidden, Derek. He gave a presentation earlier on human-centered design. That's not intuitive for a user, and that's something that you would find in different surveys you would ask about. That would be a pain point for them. So
I think one of the things that stood out to me in a comment that you made earlier is that it doesn't necessarily have to be like an apples or oranges selection, right? And I think from the Configura side of things, this is something that we see quite a bit as well, is people view it as I need to be all catalog driven or all PGC, where I think, a lot of the times it's, maybe it starts out as a catalog, but with a plan for more of a hybrid solution moving forward. So I think that's, I'll just, say that I think that's a good realization that you mentioned there earlier, because that's definitely something that we see on our side of things quite a bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody wants PGC because it's kind of the buzzword for a CET extension, right? It's the smart extension. It has all the complex rules, but it doesn't always have to be just PGC or just a catalog. You can start with a catalog and move into a PGC extension with just the ones that need it, or even eventually all of it. You can have that hybrid solution that fits where your company is at in their journey in CET, and that's important to realize.
Yeah, definitely a big thing to start small. CET extensions, as we said it, and we'll say it again a lot more in the next presentation. It's a journey, and we definitely want to know like where, if someone's not been on that journey before, which if you're not on that, you're either on that journey or you're not. So it can kind of be lonely on that journey. Like manufacturers, they don't like talking to other manufacturers about their CET extension. So it can be a lonely experience, and really making sure that you collect the right data from your users can really see where you're at and how to align that experience to make sure that your users are using your extension and they're happy.
Yeah, to follow up on Kyle's start small, I read a quote that has been thrown around somewhere in OST recently, and I can't for the life of me remember where, but it said, anything that's worth doing is worth doing poorly. Because if you're doing it poorly, at least you're still doing it, right? So you take a small bite of CET. You don't have to dive right into the big PGC extension. You can do it poorly with a catalog extension and just get your feet wet and get in there and see how it looks.
Therese, not a question, but just a comment. Nice presentation, gentlemen. I like your approach in creating a good foundation for your extension, and that definitely stands out to me as well. Getting things started on the right foot.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Other questions? Anything for Jonathan and Kyle while we have a little bit of time left? While you're thinking of those fantastic questions, once we wrap up this session, quick reminder that there isn't quite as long of a break between sessions 2 and 3 this afternoon. So I think there was 30 minutes between the first couple sessions. There's actually 10 minutes between the next two sessions. So the next session is going to kick off at 3:50 in the afternoon, 3:50. One more thing, if you were interested in collecting any CEU credits for sessions that you attend as part of CET Experience, there is a drawing that you can grab from the CET Experience briefcase. There are images of all of the Room Buddies initials. So once again, my name is Kevin Johnson. Grab the KJ and you can cut and paste that into that drawing with the individual sessions that you attended there. To be able to get credit for any CEUs that you needed to grab for the session. So just a couple house cleaning items here, housekeeping items. Any additional questions at this point?
If there's nothing else, we can give you closer to that 30-minute break.
Yeah, no. Jonathan and Kyle, thank you guys so much. Really good conversation. For anyone that's in the session that has any questions, I did record this session. Those will get posted after the conference. I know a copy of the presentation will also be uploaded there. So if you have any colleagues from your organizations that might benefit from hearing about the conversation that we went through today, just let them know that they can access this after the conference is done. But thank you so much, and hope you have a good rest of your first day of CET Experience.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having us.